Something is shifting, and if you've been paying attention, you can feel it. The silence that once protected deception is fading. The shadows that once hid betrayal are thinning. And the people who thought they could manipulate, steal, and deceive without consequence are beginning to realize something unsettling. The time of quiet observation is ending. The time of exposure is approaching. Have you ever noticed how some people move through life believing they will never be held accountable? They betray trust, take what isn't theirs, twist the truth, and walk away as if nothing happened. For a while, it may even look like they're winning. They smile publicly while hiding their actions privately. They build an image while slowly damaging others behind the scenes. And sometimes you, the one who stayed honest, begin to wonder if integrity even matters. But history, human psychology, and the patterns of life all point toward one undeniable reality. Actions always carry consequences, not always instantly, not always loudly, but eventually. Think about it. How many times have you seen someone deceive others for years, only for the truth to surface when they least expect it? How many stories have unfolded where the person who betrayed trust believed they were safe, only to watch everything unravel in a moment? It happens again and again because deception cannot maintain itself forever. Lies require constant maintenance. Betrayal leaves traces. Theft creates imbalance. And imbalance eventually demands correction. There are three kinds of people who often believe they can escape accountability: the betrayer, the thief, and the liar. Each operates differently, yet they share one dangerous assumption. They assume that silence means safety. They assume that because no one confronts them immediately, no one truly sees what they've done. But that assumption is their greatest mistake. The betrayer believes loyalty can be exploited. They enter your life pretending to support you, pretending to stand beside you, while quietly working against you. They smile while planting doubt. They listen while collecting information they can later use. And when the moment comes, they strike in a way they believe will never be traced back to them. But betrayal always leaves echoes. People may not see it at first, but patterns reveal themselves. Motives become clearer. And eventually, the mask begins to crack. Then there is the thief. Not always someone who steals physical possessions. Sometimes the theft is more subtle. They steal opportunities, credit, ideas, and recognition. They step into spaces built by someone else's effort and claim ownership. They present themselves as the architect of something they never truly created. For a while, it works. The world applauds them. Doors open for them. People admire them. But here is the problem with stolen success: it has no foundation. And when pressure arrives, when real challenges appear, the truth begins to show. Because you cannot sustain something you never genuinely built. And then there is the liar. The liar survives by shaping perception. They control narratives, twist stories, and present half-truths as complete realities. They are skilled at convincing others that wrong is right and right is wrong. Sometimes they even convince themselves. But lies are fragile structures. One contradiction can weaken them. One unexpected revelation can collapse them entirely. And when that collapse happens, it often happens quickly. This is why patience has always been one of the most underestimated forms of strength. While the betrayer plots, the thief collects, and the liar manipulates, time quietly works in the background. Truth has a strange way of surfacing, even when people try desperately to bury it. Have you ever wondered why so many people who harm others eventually face consequences they never saw coming? It's not always about punishment in a dramatic sense. Sometimes it's exposure. Sometimes it's the loss of trust. Sometimes it's watching everything they built begin to crumble piece by piece. Because once credibility disappears, everything else soon follows. And right now, for many who believed they could operate in darkness forever, that moment of realization is getting closer than they think. For a long time, it may have seemed like nothing was happening. The betrayal went unnoticed. The theft was never questioned. The lies traveled freely from one ear to another, shaping opinions and influencing decisions. If you were the one affected by it, you may have spent nights wondering how something so unfair could continue without interruption. Why does deception sometimes appear to succeed? Why do people who manipulate others seem to move forward without resistance? The answer is often uncomfortable, but deeply revealing. Truth does not always arrive immediately. In many situations, it moves slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. While people focus on appearances, reality is quietly gathering evidence. Patterns are forming, observations are being made, and the very individuals who believe they are untouchable are often revealing far more than they realize. Think about the psychology of someone who betrays trust. At first, they are cautious. They move carefully because they know their actions cannot withstand scrutiny. But once they believe they have succeeded without consequence, something changes. Confidence grows. Caution fades. They begin taking bigger risks. They repeat the same behavior again and again, assuming the outcome will always remain the same. And that is where the unraveling usually begins. The betrayer, who once whispered behind closed doors, eventually grows bold enough to speak more openly. The thief who once took small pieces begins taking larger ones. The liar who once told minor distortions begins building entire stories out of fiction. With every step, they unknowingly increase the chances that someone will notice the inconsistencies. Have you ever watched someone slowly expose themselves without realizing it? It can happen in conversations. It can happen through contradictions. It can even happen through the reactions of the people around them. Because deception rarely affects only one person. It creates ripples. It influences groups, relationships, and environments. And as those ripples expand, more eyes begin to see what was once hidden. This is why people who build their lives on manipulation often become their own greatest threat. They believe they are controlling the narrative, but in reality they are creating a trail of evidence. And time is very patient. The person who stole recognition may enjoy applause for a while, but eventually others begin asking questions. If they truly built something, why can they not explain how it works? If they truly earned their position, why do their decisions reveal a lack of understanding? Slowly, people begin to notice the gaps between the image and the reality. The same is true for the liar. Maintaining a lie requires constant adjustments. Every conversation must be remembered. Every version of the story must remain consistent. But human memory is imperfect, and pressure exposes weaknesses. One small detail forgotten, one statement that contradicts an earlier claim, and suddenly the carefully constructed narrative begins to fracture. And when cracks appear, people start looking closer. But perhaps the most powerful shift occurs within the person who was wronged. At first there may have been frustration, anger, or even doubt. You may have wondered whether speaking up would make things worse. You may have questioned whether anyone would believe you. Yet over time something else begins to develop. Clarity. You begin to see people more accurately. You begin to understand motives that were once hidden behind friendly words. You recognize patterns that once seemed random, and with that awareness comes a kind of quiet strength. Because when you see clearly, manipulation loses its power. This is the moment many deceivers never anticipate. They assume the person they harmed will remain confused, silent, or powerless. They assume the damage they caused will permanently weaken the one they targeted. But awareness changes everything. When someone understands what truly happened, they stop playing the game the deceiver designed. They stop reacting to distractions. They stop believing the narratives that were crafted to control them. Instead, they step back. They observe, and sometimes, without lifting a finger, they watch as the betrayer, the thief, and the liar begin to reveal themselves to the very people they once tried to impress. Because truth has a remarkable quality. It does not always rush forward. Sometimes it simply waits for the right moment. And when that moment arrives, the difference between appearance and reality becomes impossible to ignore. There comes a point in every story of deception where the balance begins to shift. For a long time, everything may have felt one-sided. The betrayer seemed protected, the thief appeared successful, and the liar controlled the narrative. But beneath the surface, a quiet turning point was already forming. Have you ever noticed how the same habits that allow someone to deceive others eventually become the habits that expose them? The betrayer, for example, often believes they understand people better than anyone else. They think they can predict reactions, manipulate emotions, and position themselves exactly where they want to be. At first, that confidence helps them move unnoticed. But over time, that same confidence turns into carelessness. They assume loyalty from people they never truly respected. They expect silence from those they underestimated, and eventually, someone speaks. Sometimes it's a person who noticed something small that didn't feel right. Sometimes it's someone who connects pieces of information that were never meant to be connected. Suddenly, the quiet whispers begin to form a clearer picture. The betrayer's greatest weakness is the belief that trust can be broken without leaving scars. But people remember patterns. They remember the feeling that something was off. And when enough people begin comparing experiences, the truth slowly assembles itself. Then there is the thief who built their reputation on what was never theirs to claim. For a while, success borrowed from others can look convincing. The applause feels real. The recognition feels powerful. But eventually, reality asks a very simple question. Can you sustain what you took? Real creation requires understanding. Real leadership requires responsibility. And real success demands the ability to face challenges without hiding behind someone else's work. When the moment arrives that requires genuine skill, the difference between authenticity and imitation becomes visible. People begin to notice hesitation where there should be confidence. They notice confusion where there should be clarity, and once that doubt enters the room, it spreads quickly. The foundation begins to shake, but perhaps the most dramatic collapse often happens to the liar. Why? Because lies are rarely isolated. One false statement usually requires another to protect it. That second lie then requires a third. Before long, the person telling them is maintaining a complicated web of stories, each one depending on the others to survive. And the larger the web becomes, the more fragile it gets. All it takes is one unexpected question. One witness who remembers a different version. One moment when the truth surfaces in a place the liar cannot control. Suddenly, the story they repeated with confidence no longer holds together. The people who once believed them begin to look closer. And here is the fascinating part. Exposure rarely arrives with warning. Those who built their lives around deception often assume they will see danger coming. They believe they are too clever to be caught off guard. But truth doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it appears through a small conversation. Sometimes through a document, a message, or a detail that someone finally decides to question. The very thing that seemed insignificant suddenly becomes the key that unlocks everything. Have you ever seen someone's entire image change in a single moment once people realize who they really are? It can be shocking. The same person who once commanded admiration suddenly faces skepticism. The same voice that once shaped opinions begins to lose credibility. And the same audience that once listened without question starts asking harder questions. This is not about revenge. It is about alignment. When reality finally matches what was hidden, the imbalance begins to correct itself. Trust moves away from those who abused it. Respect shifts toward those who maintained integrity, even when it was difficult. And the people who believed they could betray, steal, and lie without consequence face something they never prepared for: accountability. Not always through dramatic confrontation, but through something even more powerful. The gradual realization, among others, that the story they believed was never the full truth. And once that realization spreads, it becomes almost impossible to reverse. Because credibility, once broken, is one of the hardest things to rebuild. By the time the final pieces fall into place, the betrayer, the thief, and the liar often find themselves in a situation they never imagined. It is not sudden punishment that overwhelms them, but a slow, undeniable recognition of what their actions have caused. The people they misled begin to see patterns. The gaps between words and deeds become impossible to ignore, and their influence starts to crumble. Have you ever noticed how truth has a way of returning quietly but relentlessly to restore balance? It is rarely flashy. It doesn't always arrive with dramatic flair, but its impact is profound. For those who built their lives on deception, the shift is unmistakable. Their power diminishes not because someone attacked them directly, but because the framework they relied on, trust, perception, and fear, can no longer support them. The betrayer experiences the subtle but relentless consequences of broken loyalty. People who once trusted them begin to distance themselves. Allies they counted on grow skeptical. The quiet awareness of others slowly erodes the advantage they believed they had. Every attempt to manipulate relationships now feels heavier, riskier, more transparent. And with each move, the betrayer begins to realize that the very networks they used to exploit are now working against them, even without words being spoken. For the thief, the consequences are equally telling. Stolen opportunities, unearned credit, or misappropriated achievements may have given the illusion of success, but such foundations cannot endure scrutiny. When challenges arise that require authentic skill, the cracks in their facade become obvious. People begin to ask questions. How was this achieved? Who truly contributed? And suddenly, the applause they once received begins to fade. The recognition they thought they controlled slips from their grasp, leaving only the reality that what they claimed as theirs was never fully theirs to begin with. And the liar, whose stories wove webs of falsehoods, faces perhaps the most revealing moment of all. Lies demand constant attention, endless adjustment, and perfect memory. A single contradiction, a single unexpected question, or a single truth spoken by someone else can collapse years of deception. And when that collapse occurs, it is not only the external audience that notices. The liar themselves begins to understand the fragility of what they built. The awareness of exposure can be unsettling, yet it is necessary. It marks the first step toward accountability, toward facing the reality they had long avoided. It is in these moments that the power of patience and observation becomes clear. Those who are observant, who maintain integrity, and who stay grounded do not always need to act aggressively. They allow the patterns to reveal themselves. They allow the truth to surface naturally. And in doing so, they witness a remarkable principle of life. What is unjust, deceptive, or manipulative cannot endure indefinitely. It always meets a point of reckoning. So, what does this teach us? It teaches us the value of discernment, the importance of patience, and the inevitability of accountability. It reminds us that actions have consequences, and while some may attempt to escape them, time has a way of restoring balance. Justice does not always arrive through human hands. Sometimes it arrives through observation, reflection, and the natural alignment of truth with reality. And perhaps most importantly, it challenges us to reflect on our own lives. How do we act when no one is watching? Do we honor our commitments? Do we speak truthfully? Do we respect the trust of those around us? The stories of the betrayer, the thief, and the liar are warnings, not only for them, but for anyone who might consider the allure of deception over integrity. The path of honesty is rarely the easiest, but it is the one that endures. The choices we make, the integrity we uphold, and the truth we embrace shape not only our lives but the world around us. In the end, it is not power, manipulation, or falsehood that leaves a lasting mark. It is the courage to act rightly, to honor trust, and to walk in alignment with truth. And now, as the betrayer, the thief, and the liar face the consequences of their actions, we are reminded of a timeless reality: justice, in its quiet and relentless way, always finds those who stray from honesty. It may not come immediately, but when it does, it is unavoidable, undeniable, and transformative. The reckoning has arrived. The balance is being restored, and the world, once clouded by deception, begins to see clearly